Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time to square off. And boy, do we have a panel for you today. Let's meet two popular radio talkers, Jimmy Mathis and Dan Joseph. And folks, we have two of Baltimore's outstanding in-demand attorneys, Mary Cook and Tonya Bana. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all for watching. Maryland Governor Wes Moore is urging state lawmakers to pass legislation to hold juvenile offenders accountable, at last, thank goodness, for their lawless actions, which include carjackings, auto thefts, gun offenses, and more. And top priorities of Governor Moore are these accountability issues. Dan Joseph, kick us off today.
Yeah, well, I mean, finally, right? It's about time that Governor Moore decided that he was going to be serious about crime and punishment. Now, the juvenile issue, of course, is wrought with danger for politicians because nobody wants to be seen as saying, "Oh, we're just going to lock up the kids in prison for the rest of their lives." I don't think anybody really wants to do that. But the bottom line is, in Baltimore City and around the state, juvenile crime is way, way up right now, and there needs to be ramifications. But first of all, let me give credit to Wes Moore. I think that last year during the session, there was, almost nothing done when it came to crime in general, when it came to getting tougher on criminals. This time, he seems to be taking the issue seriously. I worry a little bit that it's going to be too heavy on the restorative justice part of it and not heavy enough on the punishment part of it, but both of them need to be a factor.
So the juvenile system is not designed for punishment, so that's the first issue. So the juvenile system is designed.
Well, it's not going to work because there need to be ramifications for committing crimes.
I understand that, but I started my career in the juvenile system. I was a bailiff in juvenile court in 1985, and then I was a prosecutor in the juvenile division for 3 years.
Wow.
The amount of crime has not changed in terms of juveniles, and the problems are, again, there's no services. There's no one who follows these kids in the community. They put kids on probation. Probation officers have literally hundreds of kids on their caseload. These kids don't get seen. I mean, it doesn't happen. So you can put all of the laws on the books that you want, but if it comes time, the individual either is transferred to the adult system and is put on, is convicted there and is sentenced there, they get their sentence there. It's the same problem. There is no accountability within the system. And we talk about making the laws tougher, but we don't ever invest money in giving people the tools to enforce the laws that are on the books.
This is what the governor wants to do. So that's good. In fact, 4 juveniles this past week carjacked, not hijacked, a woman. It's unbelievable. In fact,
it's been happening, Richard, forever.
Not at this level with carjacking.
I can tell you a case 100%. A gang of juveniles who would wait at a traffic light. When someone would come to the traffic light, one set of juveniles would throw a brick through the window. The other ones would come in and steal all of the property out of the car at the traffic lights. This was in the 80s and the early 90s. This has always been happening. You hear about the things that make it into the press. You don't hear about all the things happening because it's a confidential system. So it's not true that this hasn't been going on. It is a continual problem because there has never been a solution.
Are you denying that carjackings with juveniles are on the rise in Baltimore City and Maryland?
I'm saying that you're hearing about them more. I'm saying they're not.
Good. I want to hear about them. But I mean, let's not pretend that this is not a crisis here.
It's a crisis.
And maybe we should also be asking, why are these kids carjacking? Why are they doing that? Well, let's get to the root of the problem.
Because they can. Jimmy and Tonya.
Because they can. The message has been sent for years right now. And Mary, you're absolutely right. It's not that this is new. I think one of the reasons it's getting the level of coverage that it is because you can't turn a blind eye to it anymore. And the reality is there have been no meaningful punishments or, anything that's happened to these kids. And to Dan's point, you absolutely have seen it going up exponentially. Look, I'm with Dan on this, okay? I think the governor is saying the right things right now. I think he realizes that it's an epidemic in this state, primarily in Baltimore City, but not just in Baltimore City. And you got to at least give the guy the opportunity to deliver on what he's saying. There's also a legislative aspect about this that I think he's going to have a very hard time getting his mission done here. But we have the top guy in Maryland right now that is saying the right thing. So I'll give him a chance.
Come on, Tonya.
surprise, surprise, I agree 100% with Mary. Whenever I hear the press using words like epidemic and crisis, and there's legislation proposed coming out of that atmosphere, I'm always worried because it's not principled and it's not smart. And Mary's absolutely right that there's nothing new happening. There's just more coverage and attention being paid. And I think that that's appropriate. I'm not disagreeing with the coverage, but I do think that the focus needs to be on what Mary said, which is accountability. The juvenile system is not designed to punish. And in fact, we know from research that stiffer penalties don't ever result in a reduction of crime. That's not the fix. The fix is on the other stuff, holding the system accountable for delivering the services that they're supposed to be providing. And we know that's not happening. Why are they carjacking? Because they don't have anything to lose. They're carjacking because they have anything productive to do. And we should not be writing off a generation of kids.
Not writing off a generation of kids, but maybe there does need to be punishment. Maybe if you're out there, you're carjacking, you're involved in violent assaults, if you're brandishing a gun, maybe you do need to go to whatever the new version of Hickey is for a year. And maybe at the end of the day, that's the most compassionate thing you can do to these kids. Because what they're learning right now is that there's no consequences for their actions. And I'm telling you, I've said this many times, the carjacking of today is going to be the murder of tomorrow. And what Dan said is absolutely right. You're seeing these crimes getting more and more violent, more vicious, more brazen. You can't deny that.
I let Mary in.
So what I would tell you is that one of the problems historically that I always saw with the juvenile system is the way the Department of Juvenile Services operated. So there would be kids that were really young. They would be like 8, they would be 10, they would be 12. They would be arrested for all kinds of offenses, and everything would happen. And we closed it intake, closed it intake, closed it intake. So you'd have a kid for the first time who hit the juvenile system for an offense who literally had 10 or 12 crimes, closed at intake, and no one did anything about it. And the problem is that the way the juvenile justice system is focused is they try to do things on the back end when kids are 15, 16, 17 years old, and that is not going to work. When you see kids on the front end who are getting involved in crime at that level and have no supervision, that's where services need to go. Because by the time that kid is 16 years old, he's getting waved to the criminal justice system, and that ship has sailed. So the emphasis is on the wrong end. And it's going to have to take both, because no one wants to be carjacked and we have to stop crime. But if you really want to solve the problem, you got to work with kids in the beginning, not wait till 16 years old.
I agree with that.
I do want to hold on. The governor, along with state's attorneys Ivan Bates of Baltimore City and PG County's Aisha Braveboy, they appeared on a program on Fox Baltimore. It's called Your Voice and Your Future. On that show, Ivan Bates reported that there were 87 vehicle theft charges in 2022, and in 2023, the number rose to 216 charged, more than 250 arrests. Now, this proposed bill that we're talking about would extend the length of time that children can serve on probation and expand a list of charges for children 10 to 12 who can face charges, including firearm possession, car theft, animal abuse, and third-degree sex offense. So it sounds like the governor is really trying to beat this thing up.
You can put a kid on probation for 100 years. If no one is giving them services when they're on probation, it's nothing but lip service. It happens all the time.
The truth of the matter is here that we're almost talking about the wrong thing. What we need to be talking about here is what is it, culturally speaking, that is causing these kids to want to have handguns at age 9 and carjack people at age 10? What is going on? And unless we solve that problem, there are always going to be young kids who are going to commit crimes. There are always going to be young kids who get into trouble. I personally think that there is some deterrence when it comes to punishment, but at the same time, we got to hit it at the root. We got to get down to the brass tacks and say, what is going on culturally that is causing this, that is causing young kids to do what they're doing?
We're so schizophrenic about gun ownership. I mean, honestly, there are places in this country you can go and they would give a kid a gun at 6 and think it's perfectly fine.
Well, nobody's giving kids guns at the gun store at 6 years old. They're coming from somewhere else.
Tonya.
Can we just stop using the word cultural and culturally, because this isn't a culture. It's not like there's some identifiable community that gets together and says, let's raise kids who carjack people. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that there's abuse and neglect. These kids are abused, they're neglected, no one's invested in their futures. I've had personal experience working with at-risk kids who, Mary's absolutely right, when they're 10 and they're 12, they can engage in some pretty egregious behaviors, but there also still a sweetness and a child-like quality there that you can reach, and you can actually influence that child's future if you get that child in connection with the right services. Extending probation is just keeping kids involved with a system that isn't serving them, unless it comes with services that are delivered.
That's fine. And the services before used to be the family nucleus, okay? And this is a byproduct of men having no relevance. No. Of men having no relevance in their society. Of men having no relevance in the society anymore. And a government that consistently wants to replace that role. Well, that is a problem. That is a problem. And I think everybody on this panel doesn't want to see a 5-year-old go to jail. But this is the byproduct of a society that puts no respect on the family nucleus, and especially men in general.
There is no, okay, so you're talking about traditional families, and we are way past the idea of a traditional family. And I disagree. There are lots and lots of people out there that are single parents, mothers and fathers, who raise their children and do a fine job. So to bash the idea that we don't have Ozzie and Harriet raising the kids in our society, that
you don't need Ozzie and Harriet. Just have a father. Just have a father.
That's
okay.
All I'm saying.
Look, we know what the problem is. Hold on. We know where this is happening. Okay, this is happening in the inner city all over America. We know what the problem is. The problem is the dads aren't hanging around when they have kids, and moms are having a bunch of different kids from a bunch of different fathers. This is exactly right. It's the family. The problem is the family, and unless you find some way to solve that problem, the inner city is going to continue to be a disaster area, and young kids are going to continue carjacking people.
Wow. Let me say this. Back in September, Secretary Vincent Schiraldi of the Department of Juvenile Services introduced what's called the Thrive Academy. This is a way to intervene in the lives of kids most at risk of becoming victims or perpetrators of gun violence. And right now, there are 57 children in the Thrive Academy. And Governor Moore reports 95% of them have not been involved in gun violence since they enrolled. So that's something positive, right?
It is something positive. And I will tell you that back in the day, we used to have something called the Glen Mills School that was reserved for kids that were older. It was a high school. It was in Pennsylvania. A lot of kids were sent there. It was a great program. The problem is when a kid comes back and there's no services and they're out of that environment again, and there's no support to reacclimate that kid to his own neighborhood and to his own sort of his own peers, then you just get back to the same things all over again. It's just you remove a kid thrives, you put a kid back with no services, and sooner or later, everything that they have learned, they're back in the same old habits. And that's the problem. That's what creates recidivism amongst juveniles. You have to support these kids.
Let's take a break. We have to talk about Biden and Trump, and should they be tested for their mental acuity? Here's Howard Malice in the Voice of Square Off. Talk about two of our great sponsors. Howard.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure that you've seen some Barry Glazer TV commercials, and they're different. They get your attention. They also get your results. That's why Barry Glazer and his team, including an in-house doctor, make no apologies for getting every penny they can from the insurance companies. So when it comes to personal injury, medical malpractice, or nursing home neglect, think about Barry Glazer. He's a great lawyer. He gets the job done. Give him a call at 410-547-8568. There's a lot of barking. There's a lot of diners in Baltimore, and the most famous of them all are the Double T diners. TT, totally terrific. You're sure to find the best breakfast, lunch, or dinner from the Double T's enormous menu selections. There's Double T Diner locations on Route 40, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Laurel, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, try By the Docks and Middle River for their Monday night lobster specials. It's really a delicious special, and it's great. They're all in the Double T family. Now back to you, Richard.
Howard, you were thrown by the bark. Late ratings indicate that Square Off has an 80% share of the dog audience. So that's doggone good. All right. So come election day in November, President Biden will be 81, Donald Trump will be 78. From the Baltimore Sun, quote, in public appearances, both Trump and Biden have provided ample reasons for concern and are given to forgetting some things that they've said previously. The headline, Biden, Trump underscore the need for cognitive testing of candidates. Tonya, how do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like that's a slippery slope. If we believe that there are certain offices that are so important that there should be a panoply of screenings that happen, pre-qualification standards, then I would support that. But I think it's the fact that these guys are old. I forget stuff, but I don't think that people would be suggesting that I have to have a cognitive test for a job. So I just am a little leery of considering this now just because two old guys have trouble remembering what they said. I don't necessarily think that it should be ruled out, but as it stands, a mental acuity test is not part of the requirements to run for the presidency.
I agree. I think it's very much a slippery slope. They were kind of trying to backdoor this with Trump when invoking the 25th Amendment. I think there's a lot of subjectivity to, to these exams. Reality is you have two people pushing their 80s that are, seeking the highest office in the land. And you can get into the reasons why that is, but it looks like those are going to be the two nominees, and that's what the American people are standing for, which is interesting because I know a lot of people are tired of not having more youth on Capitol Hill and running for, state offices and definitely the highest office in the land. But again, I agree with Tonya on this. It's a very slippery slope.
I just feel like you can look at any set of candidates and silo issues that you think are very important. Something new needs to be done. And in this case, this is an easy issue to silo. I agree with Jimmy. I agree with Tonya. And I think importantly, it's the American people who will put us in the position where these are our two candidates. And they are not, they do have a lot of power. There's no question about that. But they are not making unilateral decisions. They are surrounding themselves with other individuals who are advising and assisting in the decision making. And so I just feel like that's never been a requirement. And if that's going to be a requirement, then that requires some amendment to the Constitution, because you are changing how someone runs for the highest office in the land. And that should be a decision made by everyone.
Well, President Biden has had a stuttering issue most of his life, recently mixed up the presidents of Egypt and Mexico. Trump recently confused former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley with former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. He also made a reference to the coming of World War II, forgetting that we had already had one. Dan, we haven't heard from you.
Yeah, look, I don't think cognitive tests are the right way to go about this, because ultimately this is a decision being made by supporters of these guys. And unfortunately, because of the primary system we have, they're basically saddling the rest of the country with two candidates that the rest of the country doesn't want. And that doesn't really seem like the right way to run a representative democracy. What I would do is I would severely weaken the amount of power that primary voters have. Primaries are pretty new. They really started in the 1970s. They're not working. They're not working because they're giving the rest of us, independents and people who consider themselves more moderate, they're giving us candidates that we don't have any say in. I would go back to a system where it's a convention system. I would go back to a system where perhaps the party bosses have more influence, because, yeah, as much as you don't like deeply entrenched parties and deeply entrenched party bosses, I think they would still provide us with more consensus candidates.
I think it's really interesting. Look, I'm not a fan of Nikki Haley, so I'm going to get that out there right out front. However, I think it's really interesting that they do these polls where they say in a head-to-head matchup, Nikki Haley would beat Joe Biden, but yet she gets zero traction because she cannot overcome the Trump supporters in the Republican Party. So literally, the Republican Party has a candidate who could likely win the White House, and she cannot get any traction because of the number of Trump voters, which are never going to reach a majority of Americans. I find that sort of dovetails, I think, Dan, with what you're saying. I find that incredible.
Look, and let's get back to, if you need to take these, it's mental tests today. What about your level of education? If you own property, you want to start going down this road, and Mary, you're absolutely, I'm not suggesting it. I agree with you. If you're going to do this, it needs to be through a constitutional amendment. We have a country that can't agree on anything right now, so I don't think we're going to amend the Constitution. But if you're seriously talking about doing this, that's the way you got to do it.
Dan, what are you thinking about there?
No, I mean, I think that's right. You would have to change the Constitution, and it's a bunch of really old guys who are writing who are making the laws. So it would be very, very difficult to do. Again, though, I agree with Mary. I mean, what we're seeing, and I think what most Americans see with the MAGA base, I'm not talking about all Trump voters, although, I sometimes question what's going on there too. But the MAGA base is holding us hostage. And, to a certain extent, so are the very loyal Biden voters. We deserve a different election than this.
But look, you can't blame the voters for choosing who they want. I mean, you can, but let's do that over drinks later. I think that the focus really should be on reforming the system. We do not have the best systems in place to, if we're going to be a representative democracy, we don't have the right systems in place to do that. And, Richard, you asked what Dan was thinking. I'm thinking about the election for our mayor. We're going to be in a situation where we're probably going to end up with someone who hasn't received a mandate or a majority of voters. Why can't we have a runoff? Like, there are better systems for us to do the things that we're doing. We should explore that.
I just have to segue a little bit and say my biggest concern is actually not the presidential election. My biggest concern is what's happening with the judiciary, because what people don't appreciate is that is really where the laws are either they are held up, or they are limited, or they are made. The judiciary has an incredible amount of influence over our everyday life. And I think that's one of the major issues. I mean, I think this whole idea too of putting younger and younger people on the bench, not because those younger people are necessarily qualified, but because you want longevity and you want you want your legacy to continue. Right. Judicial appointments have become legacy issues for politicians, and that is a huge problem. And you look no further than Alabama to figure that out.
The question is, and we'll stop here for Howard, why can't candidates for high public office be independently screened for their health, including their mental acuity? If it's expected from people behind the steering wheel, shouldn't we expect it from those given responsibilities for launching a nuclear attack? So there you go. Howard Mathis, you come back in here. What do you got?
Hey, I'm here. For fine dining, special occasions, or just watching sports in their sports bars, Pappas should be your number one choice. Enjoy a Pappas crab cake, or as Richard calls it, Rich, while you're drinking. What do you call it?
Fab cake. I need a little more vodka.
The fab cake, which is Oprah's favorite. But one of the many delicious choices on the Pappas menu. Plus, Pappas ships their crab cakes all over the country with 4 locations, including their newest sports bar and restaurant in Bel Air. See you at Pappas. And Leading Edge Auto Body and Mechanical Repair want you to know that the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. Richard and his family have been taking their cars to Leading Edge for many, many years. They work on all makes and models, and they offer free pickup anywhere in the Baltimore area. So call Leading Edge at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in the heart of Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. Back to you, Richard.
They are great at Leading Edge. My sister-in-law, Jeannie's Honda is down there right now, front end, and they're very reasonable, and the service is great. Now, long before Travis Kelce came into her life, tens of millions of fans, many of them young voters, made Taylor Swift the most popular entertainer in the world. One of his recent HBO programs on it, Bill Maher said that he thinks Taylor Swift could use her help to swing the upcoming 2024 presidential election, warning far-right pundits to tread carefully because, in his opinion, Taylor is a person who could literally swing the election. Jimmy, what do you think about that?
No, I mean, you can't deny her brand. I don't understand. Look, it's not my cup of tea. I don't have anything against Taylor Swift. I have 4 daughters, and honestly, as far as role models go in America right now, I'm totally fine with her. Her brand's insane. I've never seen anything like it. I don't, just watching her from afar, I don't see her as somebody that wants to get involved in politics and to use her platform, her stage to do that. But sure, the bat that she swings, Uh, yeah, I'm sure it could have an impact. I don't know. It moves a presidential election, but who knows? I mean, I can't think of the last time I've seen a personality in my lifetime at that level that's had that kind of influence in society.
So she has used her platform to get people to register to vote, which I think is a good thing, and to encourage people to vote. She has thrown her weight behind. I mean, she did speak out against Marsha Blackburn, and Marsha Blackburn still won. So I don't know what her political power is at the ballot box, but I just have to say that the problem that I have with the attacks on her, and there have been a lot of them, is I'm I'm an old Swiftie. I will say that the reason I am is because she filed a lawsuit for the sexual harassment when somebody grabbed her rear end, and took it to trial for $1 in damages to prove the point that no one has the right to touch her without her say so. She took on the people who bought her music catalog by re-recording all of her music. She took control of her own power. She has given money to every food bank in every city, significant amounts of money in every food bank in every city where she has played a concert. She has all of her people who support her. She's given huge bonuses, $100,000 bonuses to the truckers who moved her equipment. I mean, I think that she is, again, there's nothing profane about what she does. I mean, she writes her own music. She produces a lot of her own stuff. She's hardworking. She's a great role model. And why people would want to tear that down is really, I just don't understand that, because you're right. She doesn't often speak on political issues, and
No.
encouraging young people to vote is a good thing.
Sure. You also see her at her shows. If a fan is being assaulted or being mistreated, again, I don't not like her music. It's just not my thing. But I do not understand where the vitriolic hatred for this person comes from. I don't get it. I really don't.
I'm flummoxed by it too. I don't understand it, and I like Mary said. I think her real power is to get young people registered to vote, and if she does that, she will indirectly probably be helping the Democrats, because young people vote for Democrats. So, I don't have a problem with this. I do think there's something to this conspiracy theory, not something to it, but the conspiracy theory about her trying to, the Super Bowl being won by the Kansas City Chiefs intentionally. The NFL set that up, right? Because they want Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce to endorse Joe Biden in the middle of the field. That's bogus, but I think it also comes from a distrust that the people in the MAGA movement have of celebrities and of those with power. And it's nonsense. It's crazy, but I think that's really where it stems from. It's the fact that celebrities are not trusted within the MAGA movement, except Trump.
Tonya, Bana.
Yeah, I just can't. There's nothing at all that you could tell me about Taylor Swift that makes her hateable. It's just, there's nothing to hate about this woman. I don't understand why she inspires devotion, and she really does inspire a lot of criticism, and I don't get it. But you know what? There are plenty of celebrities who throw their weight behind various candidates. That's just always going to be a factor, and who knows whether it can make the difference or not. I don't think so.
In Bill Maher's words, quote, "I would just say to the MAGA people, you should be very careful attacking Taylor Swift, because she is someone who transcends political parties. All Taylor has to say to her voting eligible Swifties, including the senior Swiftie on our panel, Mary Cook, get registered, and you don't know what's going to happen." Well,
and I think that's a good, sorry guys, but I think a lot of people are threatened by her power. She's a woman. She's powerful. She doesn't back down. She basically has been in charge of her own career her entire life. I mean, just going back to her roots, she was offered a contract with RCA initially when she went to Nashville and said, if you're not going to let me perform my own music, I don't want your music contract. I mean,
yeah. If Bill Maher's point was that they should tread lightly and not attack her and criticize her and put her in fear, then I think it's a point well made, because I could see large constituencies of people galvanizing and coming to defend her and voting and exercising their vote to convey their disdain for Trump supporters if the Trump base attacks her in a way that makes her feel threatened.
all right,
And
before we leave, far-right media personalities, Charlie Kirk and Jack Posobiec, have both suggested that Taylor Swift's connection to young voters could definitely pose a problem for the Republicans. And on that note, we're over our time. Mary, do you want to close out the show by singing one of Taylor Swift's?
No, I would not do that to any of you. And I certainly would insult her.
Hey guys, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Dan and Jimmy Mathis, Mary, Swifty, and of course, the lovely Tonya Bana, and all of you in the audience who are helping our viewership go up every single week, and we do appreciate it. We're at squareoff.net, and we're also online at YouTube at Square Off Show. Right, Howard? Square Off Show. All right. See you next time, ladies and gentlemen. Be
Right.
careful, be safe. And once again, we square off. See you in March. Bye-bye.